Good morning, all. I have 11:59, and we'll give a few more minutes for people to join, and then we will get started. All right, it is noon, and welcome. My name is Kathy Wibberly, and I'm director of the Mid-Atlantic Telehealth Resource Center. I will be your host today as we kickstart a conversation about the role of artificial intelligence in shaping the future of telehealth and healthcare. In this discussion starter webinar, we will start some exploration about how AI might be used to address health workforce challenges. While discussions around healthcare workforce shortages were traditionally confined to rural and underserved populations or specific specialties like child psychiatry, the landscape has evolved into a critical crisis. The impact of these shortages has transcended traditional boundaries, now plaguing all facets of healthcare. From sprawling academic medical centers like the one I'm at, to urban and suburban hospitals, health systems, small rural critical access hospitals, to skilled and assisted living facilities. There's no segment of the healthcare sector that remains untouched by the pervasive challenge posed by workforce scarcity. The advisory board highlighted these as the top drivers of clinician turnover. We're looking at burnout. So staff experience chronic workplace stress exacerbated by the pandemic and inadequate staffing, feelings of disrespect. Staff voice ongoing concerns about pay, treatment, work-life balance, concerns about workplace safety. Staff live with the threat of workplace violence and harassment from patients and families. And these structural issues remain due to lack of funds to make improvements. More clinicians leave due to these problems, and then there's understaffing, and it creates a mix, and then we enter into this vicious cycle. So now we have been hearing all about artificial intelligence, and it's become ubiquitous in today's landscape. We hear about it in our daily lives through ChatGPT, through uses of Google. And according to the market research study, the global AI in healthcare market was valued at $16.3 billion in 2022, with projections indicating a substantial growth to $173.55 billion by 2029, boasting a remarkable compound annual growth rate of 40.2%. And that is amazing to me. Amidst this transformative wave, a crucial question arises. Can AI applications effectively address our workforce challenges in some way? While the true beginning of the professional health workforce issue begins with getting people to enter the workforce and educating them, we will save that for another presentation. For today's webinar, we wanted to focus on the existing workforce and the challenge of recruitment and talent acquisition for our telehealth service and programs, and then the challenge of workforce retention as clinicians deal with unprecedented levels of burnout and stress. In the course of planning this webinar, we had the privilege of engaging with two companies deeply committed to and actively harnessing AI technologies. One company specializes in using AI for talent acquisition. The other operates in the clinical domain. Both share a common conviction that AI can serve as a pivotal solution to address the prevailing challenges in our workforce. Regrettably, we have had an unforeseen development. One of our presenters has fallen ill with the flu, and as a result, will be unable to join us as planned. Despite this last-minute turn of events, we intend to proceed with our agenda, so we'll only be hearing from one of the companies today. There's a possibility we may conclude the session a little bit earlier than originally planned, and I just thank you for your understanding and flexibility with this. With that said, it's also important to note that the inclusion of vendors in our discussion does not constitute a recommendation or endorsement from our part. Rather, it serves as a starting point for conversation, showcasing products present in the current marketplace. We invite you to listen to their insights, form your own judgments on the potential impact of AI in addressing workforce challenges, and then ask your questions, as I will also be asking questions at the end. So let's let the conversation begin. Get us started. We have Mike Maffei, co-founder and president of AlediumHR. Mike has over a decade of experience in leading Aledium. Mike is a seasoned and innovative executive with a passion for finding and placing the best talent for the healthcare sector. He has proven track record of delivering effective and efficient recruiting solutions that reduce costs by at least 35% for their clients using their proprietary Talentical AI talent acquisition platform. Mike holds credentials in quality management, process improvement, and new business development, such as Six Sigma Green Belt, TQM, and SOPK. He has also received multiple awards and publications for his expertise and contributions to the healthcare recruiting field. Mike will be joined by colleagues Brandon Maffei and Peter Caplan at the end as we enter into questions. So let's hear from Mike and his thoughts about the role AI plays in recruitment and talent acquisition, and how you might see this helping with our current healthcare workforce challenges.
Thank you, Kathy. I appreciate it. And good afternoon, everyone. As Kathy had mentioned, I am one of the founding partners and president of AlediumHR. And my hope during the next 15 minutes is I'm going to give you certainly how we utilize AI in our business, but also some real life examples of what we have seen in the industry, especially over the last year with the introduction of ChatGPT. And we started utilizing AI 3 years ago in one of our products. And so I'll give you a little bit of information about that also. If we go to the next slide, we are a boutique healthcare recruiting company, talent acquisition company, but our specialty is telehealth. We were actually the first company back in 2013 that introduced telehealth to the recruiting world. So we have been doing telehealth recruiting going on our 11th year now. We started mainly with hospitals, but when COVID hit, as we all know, telehealth took off and created an abundance of new companies, new startups. So now we support not only hospitals, but startup telehealth companies, all different kinds of industry companies that are looking for remote workers. And that's one of the largest growing segments of healthcare right now, and one of the reasons why AI is so important. Next slide. We recognize AI in different aspects, and not to get in depth too much about the technology itself, because on any given day, there are at least 100 different new AI programs that are being released. And it's just not the recruiting world. It's just in general. And I'm sure a lot of you have been exposed to a lot of the different AI programs and bots that are out there that are supposedly make your life easier. From a recruiting standpoint, there are certainly what we consider three key differentiators in utilizing this technology. Number one, it helps source candidates faster. When you think about recruiting, you think about seeing a job on a job board, applying for that job either through the job board or through the company's website. And then you're thinking that it'll go through a system that will pick out keywords, and then you'll get a call from a recruiter if you meet some of the qualifications. That is the old way, and there are still many companies utilizing that way. But really what AI will do from a recruiting aspect, it automates that screening process. We'll dive a little bit into that in a minute. But what I mean by automating the screening process, it saves time in what we call candidate matching. So instead of utilizing a situation to where you're allowing your old technology, such as an applicant tracking system, which can be supported by AI, you're having AI basically do a lot of that upfront screening for you. And then in the third piece of this is really important. It removes biases of evaluating a candidate for a particular position. But I want to expand on that a little later, because when you look at an AI technology, the AI technology is developed from a recruiting standpoint based on what the client is looking for: job qualifications, experience, location. There's all different types of information that you can utilize AI for to do a candidate match. The bias piece, yes, it removes bias, but you have to be very careful in how you are interpreting the bias of the technology. And we'll talk about that. So in when we're utilizing AI in our recruiting process, we do it to improve efficiency, certainly expands the candidate pool, and it also, in the bias or the fairness standpoint, it evaluates the candidates based on their credentials, experience, etc. But the efficiency piece, the speed of hire piece, the quality of candidate piece is significantly improved if you are utilizing the AI component correctly. Next page, Kathy, or next slide, please. So how does it personalize recruiting? Because essentially, when we look at AI, and we started using AI in our business back in the fall of 2020, when we released our talent acquisition platform that was built on AI called Talentlytical. So this was right in the middle of COVID, because we were recognizing the fact that certainly telehealth was expanding rapidly. The need for healthcare professionals was enormous and was going to continue to grow even past COVID or even post COVID. So we had been in the development stages of this technology even before we saw the growth of this or the expansion of this late last year. So we actually had a real good heads up in developing Talentlytical, and now we're on our 11th version of the product. But really, when we say personalizing recruiting, it does 5 things. It analyzes the resumes. We talked about this. You take the person out of it, you take the ATS out of it, and what we had found out in our research in developing our own product was a lot of ATS systems do a very poor job of scanning through resumes in order to find the best candidates. And we saw that with our own ATS system. And so that was one of the precursors of us developing our own AI technology. Was we wanted not only something that could quickly scan through a resume, but could do a better job of identifying the best candidates for the job. From a performance standpoint, the algorithms that you build as part of your AI, part of the AI technology, excuse me, in a lot of ways can be built based to pre-evaluate candidate performance. And what I mean by that is essentially, when you think of AI from the sense of how it thinks, and there's 2 different parts of AI. There is the part where it's pulling information from a candidate, and there's a part of that it's thinking like the candidate in reference to the job that they're applying for. So that's to predict how this person could be a potential match based on the type of role, but also the type of environment that they're going to be working in. And what I mean by environment: hospital environment, smaller company environment, the brand of the company itself. We already talked about reduced time to hire. With the competitive nature of hiring healthcare professionals, the more you can do to reduce the time and automate the manual side, the better you are to have the ability to bring candidates to the table for your client. And this is a big issue. You do not want to draw out the screening process, because using a nurse, a registered nurse as an example, there are so many jobs available right now that they can have their pick. And so how do you differentiate the client that you're recruiting for versus someone else? And so one of the ways to do that is to have not only to reduce the time to hire, but also help the candidate go through the process and expedite them through the process a lot easier than maybe they have done in the past. One of the great benefits we have seen using AI in recruiting is to identify gaps. Whereas when we utilize our technology in starting to recruit for a particular position, it's constantly learning about the role, about the people that are applying for the role. It's also learning about, gaps where improvement can be made. So it's not simply a technology that once you are utilizing it stays the same. It's not static in a sense. What it does is learning, and it provides you feedback on what these gaps are. So hypothetically, if you're recruiting for a difficult position and you're finding it's not bringing in a lot of candidates, the technology should be able to tell you what it's running into. And so you identify those gaps and you can make changes within the technology in order to improve the candidate flow that is coming in. And then personalizing the technology, the AI AI component that you're using is very important, whether it's personalizing the emails, personalizing the text messages. With our technology, if they do find a match, it can automatically text and automatically email the candidate and let them know that we're recruiting for this opening. And if they have an interest in that role, they can apply through that link. And so it's immediate. It's not going to be delayed by 1 or 2 days because a recruiter has to look at it. There are many different ways, and there are many different programs that are out there in the market now as it relates to AI and as it relates to recruiting. So it's not like AlediumHR has the market on recruiting technology as referenced by AI. There are a lot of different AI programs, and there continue to be. And what you have to decide in a lot of cases is what's going to be the best fit, what is going to be the best match for your type of company, organization, and what type of roles that you're recruiting. Next slide, Kathy. This is the best part about it. It really, if you think about all of us, we've all applied for jobs over the years. And some of it can be just downright frustrating when you apply online, you see a job hypothetically on LinkedIn, then you have to go into the company's ATS and fill out all this information and fill out all these forms. Sometimes it could take an incredibly long time to even apply for a job. That is dramatically improving, and it had to. Because if you have a frustrated candidate experience, then you're not going to get the type of employee or the right candidate for the role. So AI dramatically improves it. We can automate the screening and scheduling of interviews without even talking to a person. They can do the scheduling 24/7. We have the capabilities to do AI interviews 24/7. So it's very personalized experience. So it's on the candidate's time frame. It's not on having to schedule based on a calendar. We can only interview you between 2 and 3 o'clock. So the more that we can provide and improve the experience for a candidate, the better they're going to feel about the job that they're applying for. And AI, and what we've seen over the last 3 years with the release of our technology, we get a lot and healthcare professionals are busy. Most of them are employed. They work odd shifts. So if they're looking to move to another role, it's got to be on their schedule. And so we get a lot of really good feedback from candidates that tell us that the whole experience has been non-invasive, has been very easy for them to learn about the job, to schedule themselves, and to get the information that it needs. And the reduced bias pops up again. And I said earlier that I would talk a little bit about this. We all are human. We all have our biases, whether we know about them or whether they're deep rooted in our consciousness. So when you're utilizing AI, it's thinking straightforward. And it's thinking straightforward based on what you have told it you want it to look for. So there's no biases based on race, religion, sexual orientation, etc. So you have to think from that standpoint that when it's evaluating the candidates, it's evaluating the best candidate possible. But you still have to be careful. And the one thing that I tell my the recruiters in our company is this: AI doesn't mean that it does everything. You still, in recruiting, have to have the human involvement. What it's doing and what it really is meant to do is to take out a lot of that pre-work that a recruiter used to have to do manually. You still have to have the personalized experience with that candidate because they're still going to have questions. They still want to talk to somebody. Now, this, as the technology evolves, this may change. We just recently introduced an AI technology that will actually perform a live interview with a candidate, and it will answer their questions with no human involvement. It's quite interesting, meaning that if I'm interviewing for a registered nurse role, there is an AI bot that if I'm asking the questions to that candidate and the candidate asks me questions, I can answer those questions. So as the months go by, what we are seeing from where we started to where we're going is a tremendous change in the way AI is being viewed. And of course, you can see it in the news all the time, regardless of whether it's tailored towards recruiting or any industry. There are some definite things that you need to be cautious of. But from a recruiting standpoint, if it's done correctly, and some of the things that I've laid out here so far, it can dramatically improve, your process. Next slide. And then we go back to the reduced bias. There's unbiased algorithms, and AI is all about algorithms. So it analyzes without, again, I just mentioned that. So it's a fair and impartial evaluation of a candidate. The scoring is basing on their skills and experiences. So it's data that the technology is evaluating without even knowing about, okay, what is this person really like from a personal standpoint, things that I just mentioned earlier. And it's a much fairer outcome, because you can create actually a more diverse hiring workforce through AI, because you can prove that it's not evaluating anything about bias. You're probably wondering, why am I spending, I've mentioned this 3 times. The one thing you have to also be cognizant of is AI is a human driven technology. Okay. It doesn't come suddenly it doesn't grow in the ground and suddenly create itself. A human is involved in creating the technology and telling it what to do. So the cautious piece of that is that it can, and I think this is where people are very concerned about AI, because of the human involvement, you can utilize it in a not intended fashion. And that's where you have to be careful. And I think that's where, when we talk about employment and we talk about compliance, and you talk about the equitable employment for all, I think where AI is going to go to is going to have to be compliant based on the laws that we also have to be compliant on now when it talks about fair and equitable employment. And so we're already looking at our ways that on our website that we have our diversity. and how we have it worded to ensure people are comfortable in utilizing this technology, that it has reduced the bias. But again, when I say reduced, you don't see the word eliminate. So you've got to be very careful when you're evaluating something like this for recruiting. That's one of the things that I would spend a great deal of time talking to the vendor about, is how did they how do this? How are you actually protected? Next slide. So we just puts this in a one slide format of the faster hiring process. Not going to spend any time because we've talked about this, but this is everything AI can do for you. Number 4, shortlisting the candidates. You may be thinking, well, gee, can it make a mistake? Yes, it's not perfect. And that's where the human involvement has to come into play. Anytime that we're utilizing Talentlytical, which is our talent acquisition, AI talent acquisition platform, I ask the recruiters to always take a example batch of resumes that have been rejected, and to make sure that they were rejected, and if they were rejected for the right reasons or were they rejected for the wrong reasons. It's really helped us to improve our ability to ensure AI compliance, that we are bringing in the right candidates, that we're not eliminating candidates. And anytime that we may find a certain number, we can go back, and as AI is machine learning, as it's learning all the time, we can tell this what it's missing from a particular job. So we're always evaluating it. We do not do anything that leaves it alone from that standpoint. Next slide. And this is just a short slide, not a sales slide, but how do we use AI? You've got if you want to screenshot it with your phone, there's kind of what you can do. You can do there. It tells you a little bit more about it. But our product is called Talentlytical. We call it intelligent recruiting. And really what this does is what I've been describing for. We don't have to just go out and post jobs on job boards and wait for candidates to come in. This is a technology that can proactively seek candidates that are either looking for positions or they're passive candidates. So it taps into sources, and this is what AI technology should be used for. Tap into sources that you normally would not have access to connect with healthcare professionals. So you're connecting only with people who want to connect with you. So whether it be social media, whether it be LinkedIn, whether it be all these different associations that are out there, the AI technology in itself are Talentlytical. So we'll go out there and potentially find those candidates to bring them in. And so it's a ongoing Talentlytical. As I said, we're on our 11th version right now. And as AI continues to improve, Talentlytical will continue to improve. And the thing about this, regardless of whether it's Talentlytical or another product out there, it behooves you to look at ways to improve internally the ways that you're not only recruiting, but also how you're evaluating. And if you're having roadblocks along the way of getting healthcare professionals in the door, you genuinely need to look at utilizing AI within your organization. I think that's the last slide. Oh, key takeaways. Or that's the last slide, I promise. So here's the key takeaways. Wraps it all up. What's AI do? Faster hiring process. It will reduce your recruiting costs. And that's something that we have done. And Kathy alluded to it at the beginning. Not only has it reduced our internal recruiting costs, it also allows us to pass that savings along to our clients. It's a better candidate experience, and it's improved from the standpoint of providing a better quality candidate. So companies are not looking through piles of resumes or looking through their ATS system trying to find someone.
Right.
And there we go.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank
And
you.
so, as mentioned earlier, in case you joined us late, Mark was our second vendor that was going to talk about the clinical side of AI. And unfortunately, Mark is sick with the flu today and is unable to join us. So I'm going to just really quickly flip through his slides so that you see what he was going to talk about. Hopefully he'll be able to join us at a later presentation. But we will go right into Q&A, and I do have a number of questions, and I also see questions in the question box. So if you have questions for Mike and his team, please go ahead and jump in and put those in the question box. And I will go ahead and stop sharing for a second, and we can have people enable their videos. So we do have a question in the question box from, I think it's Jadith Gutierrez. And it says, how do you account for biases that are intrinsically built into the AI algorithm? For example, predicting performance based on gender without accounting that women might have time off from maternity leave, etc.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think that's where I was saying you have to be cautious. That when you are evaluating, like when we utilize Talentlytical, it does not base anything off of the name of the person. So it is only looking at the background and the experience of the person, if that makes sense. So there's no gender bias. There's no what we've always advised people to do when they're doing their resumes is provide as minimal information about you personally as you possibly can. Remember on the resume years ago, I'm giving away my age, but you would put your whole address on there, your phone numbers, you give away a lot of information. But in today's world, with you don't have to do that. So in our case, we are doing a great job of eliminating those kinds of thinking, and not saying that it cannot happen in other AI technologies, because again, as I alluded to in my presentation, AI is developed technology. It's learning, but you also can prevent it from learning. And I think that's the key right there. And so that's where we are always looking at ways to where bias can be eliminated in the situation. We've come a long way. It's been a learning experience for us. I'm not saying that in our first version we were doing anything remotely wrong, but you think about the first version we had versus the 11th, it's night and day, because we are assured that it's looking at two primary areas. Their experience is the most important thing based on the job itself. That's very important. And then number two is their their interest level in that job. And that is very important, because someone may see a job description and say, okay, I'm interested in those requirements, but are they truly interested in the job? So we don't just share the job description through Talentlytical. It's also about the client too, and they can learn more about the client. So I think that's helped us, and we haven't really, but the question's good, because you need to be asking that to anytime you're evaluating that from a recruiting standpoint. You need to ask that of the vendor you're talking to. How do they eliminate that? How do they prevent that from happening?
Great, thank you. So I have a question for you. I think, there are challenges and known biases, and it looks like you're working on improving those models. How do you accept or navigate challenges with like user acceptance? Do people feel like AI technologies are okay to use in this talent acquisition field? Are there some hesitancies about that and how do you kind of help to tackle some of that to ensure the transparency and explainability of the decision making?
Yeah, I think there always is hesitancy, because how quickly, when we were using Talentlytical, up until May of last year, you didn't really get too many questions. But when Chat GPT with OpenAI was suddenly available to everybody, everybody then started asking questions, which was natural because then it becomes not just a product of AlediumHR, so to speak. Now they're being hit in waves about AI technology for everything. So certainly those questions came up. I think what's helped us though is we had a 2.5 year uh, cycle before we really got hit with the whole AI thing. So people were becoming comfortable with how we were doing our business. So there's a lot more positive that comes out of it than questions, simply because it's making their life easier. I mentioned that during the presentation. If you're a nurse working a shift, early morning shift of you're working all night, you're certainly not going to want to interview first thing in the morning. So if you have the ability to apply for a job on your schedule and to get through the process, they're probably going to like that. So we get a lot more positive than we get, I hate to use the word negative because it's really not negative, but questions about it. But I think it's my biggest fear of AI is the future and the utilization of how we're already seeing it now with AI being used to defraud and mirror people's voices. Out in California, just to be very clear, or be very brief, there was a mother who thought her son was kidnapped and was being held for ransom because the voice that called her was actually her son's voice, a mirror of her son's voice. So these are the things people are scared of. They're not really, are concerned with. They're not concerned with what we do in far recruiting because it makes it easier. They're, they're more concerned about what's going on in the world and how it's not being used for the good, so to speak.
So in your field, in recruitment and talent acquisition, what are some things that keep you up at night in terms of what AI could potentially, the potential red flags, things that could go really wrong?
Um, Going back to it being used in not the way it's intended to be used. My concern is, and I've got this passion about recruitment in the healthcare industry, especially, and it's going to be incredibly difficult over the next 10 to 15 years because of the short amount of people going into nursing and physicians and things like that. Of course, now with telehealth, you have a lot more opportunities. But the thing that keeps me up at night is it being used in recruiting in some way, shape, or form of the bias standpoint not being used correctly. And that's something that you hear about. Well, the government needs to step in, and we need to have laws around here about this. And it's going to be interesting because employment is heavily regulated, diversity. And so when you think about an industry that could really be turned upside down, you've got to think about that. And all of these companies that are popping up with AI technology just can't keep up with them. And a lot of it has to do with, unfortunately, recruiting. And then, how is it going to be utilized when you think about that? Does it keep me up at night more than the fact of there's a shortage of healthcare professionals in the industry? Probably not, but it is something that I think about. And I tell my developers in Talentlytica, we have to be better than anyone else as it pertains to that. So no one ever if they do question us, we can prove to them that we're doing things the right way.
So I want to tag on to the question that was asked. If your algorithm, so you talk about interviewing, which is very interesting. But I think, there are some cultural differences, probably gender differences, just in terms of how speech is used, how language is used, the wording that's used. How do you ensure reliable outcomes when there might be some inherent biases in, the types of words that are used, the word patterns that are used by certain people of different races, of different genders, if you're going to be doing interviews that are AI based?
Yeah, this is one of the most intriguing aspects of AI is that, you know, just taking the recruiting piece out of it now to where you can develop an AI partner or you can develop an AI buddy and it gets used to you and things like that. And in the recruiting piece, the thing that, and this is a, to me, a very brand new technology. Uh, we've limited it in regards to how we've rolled it out. And what I mean by that is we're in test mode right now because those are the exact things that we're evaluating. How does it react to those things that you just mentioned? So it's not creating a bias. Is the person that is asking the questions or being interviewed, are they comfortable with the responses that they're getting? So those are those are so important when you think about a person interviewing for a role, because right now we don't utilize it when we interview physicians or nurses. Uh, as I said, we're in test mode right now because we've got to work through all those things in order to where a person doesn't feel like they've been discriminated against. And there are other programs out there that are in market right now that do that. And I've always said that, you know, if you're looking to evaluate those, you know, you need to have a test done, or you need to go through a discovery phase to make sure that it is applicable to what your candidate's database is going to look. Because the worst thing that can happen is someone, a certain segment of the population, or multiple segments of the population, feel like they're being discriminated against because of technology. And there's articles being written about that as we speak, about AI, and they have uncovered some discriminatory practices. And it's just because everybody's going to market and throwing stuff out there without fully testing it. And that's the danger right there of it happening when you have an AI interviewer that is that you're actually talking to.
So what do you actually do, or what can you do to test some of these algorithms? So let's say you do, 100 interviews with men, women, people of all races and ages. What are some things that ensure that, let's say, people with similar experience and talent and skills kind of rise to the top despite, wording differences or semantic differences?
Yeah, that's a good question. And so, you know, it's the level of the job itself. You are going to, and again, this is nothing about the quality of the person, it's the skill set. It's a lot different if you're interviewing a, a patient services rep for a job. So more or less someone who works on the phones, or maybe is talking to patients in a hospital, helping them out with easy stuff. Versus if you're interviewing this way a cardiac RN, RN specialist in the cardiac unit. So that's where and I use this in the sense of where it's not anything wrong. It's just two different types of interviews. And so you have to be able to understand that when you're utilizing the technology. And so the technology understands by the way that you're utilizing it and programming it, the differences between the concept of interviewing this RN for in a cardiac unit versus a patient services rep. And that's the key right there. They're never going to be the same type of interview, meaning from a skill, knowledge standpoint. It's always going to be something different. And this is something that I think that is imperative that recruiters understand when they're rolling out this type of technology, the types of jobs that they have, what are the main jobs that they're recruiting for. because there may be some that it works and there may be some at the present time it doesn't work. And so you really have to think hard before you think about utilizing that kind of technology.
Well, thank you so much. And, I think that we all have a lot to think about. There's certainly many use cases for AI. And for recruitment, it's certainly one area where much money, much time is spent, especially with the high turnover right now in our healthcare system. And so, where can that actually address some of the challenges that we face with the workforce shortages, which are also applicable to people in our HR departments, right? We have workforce shortages there as well.
Well, you're exactly right. I just read an article the other day. One of the top 10 jobs that are going to be needed over the next 5 years is healthcare recruiter. So this, we all know the reasons why, but it's obvious that the healthcare system is going to need thousands and thousands of employees. And so how do you do the best job of bringing those employees, and how do you attract them to your company is the absolute key to all of this when you're utilizing technology like AI.
All right. Well, thank you again for your time, for your experience on this issue, and for your thoughtful insights about
Enjoyed it. And if anyone,
we do have one more question.
Okay, good.
Popped in. So, any suggestions to prevent candidates from using AI to answer questions during a virtual interview?
You mean what types of questions are?
So, how do you prevent candidates from actually using AI to answer your questions during a virtual interview?
That's really good. Well, you know what? There's nothing that that you really can do. Could they be on Chat GPT and typing in the question, and Chat GPT or Bard or Jasper AI, any of the other programs that are out there provide you with the answer? There's no way what the AI interviewer would do if there's a pause. The AI interviewer would go, "Are you still there? Is there something else that I can help you with? Can we go on to the next question? Can I answer another question?" But we all know that if we type something in, you get an immediate response. But think about this, especially in the healthcare field. Most of the questions are going to be directed around your experiences and your knowledge. And so they're not going to really not be able to answer those types of questions. On the side of using an AI interviewer, you just have to be cognizant enough of what questions do you need to ask. And that's when we work with a client and we say, what are the 10 most important things you want to know about a person when you're interviewing them or when we're screening them? And so we can, if they're all applicable, we can take those questions and the AI interviewer can ask those. So if you and I, Kathy, are talking and all of a sudden you ask me a question or I ask you a question about your background and experience in relation to being a registered nurse in the cardiac unit, you tell me, but it's not matching up really what the client wants to hear. What that AI interviewer will do, then it'll go, "Kathy, can you elaborate further on this?" And it'll take out the specific thing that the client wants to know that maybe you didn't answer. So maybe on the lower level jobs, when it says something like, tell me a little bit about your ability to do something very simple. I don't know. The personal aspect of it, AI thinks in two ways. It thinks about the knowledge and experience, but it also has to think about, how do I communicate with this person on a personal level about personal experiences? And I think that's probably where it's going to continue to grow. And that's another fear I have. You said, keep me awake at night. This is going to get smarter and smarter and smarter. And that's the fear I have, is how smart can this thing get? We'll soon find out.
Yeah, I loved that question, actually. I think it was a
It was a
you know,
great
at some
question
point you
because,
envision, you know, two AI chatbots talking to each other and uh, making stuff up.
well, and that's the reason why you cannot take a person out of the process. It doesn't mean we use AI and AI does everything and then the person goes off to the client. We always have a recruiter talk to the person because we want them, number one, as I said at the beginning of the presentation, they have that personal aspect. They want to see a real person. So a live person is always involved in talking to them to answer any questions that maybe weren't brought out in the other interview or just to make them feel comfortable about what they're going into. You're not going, one thing AI will never do with recruiters, I say that in 10 years from now, I may be proven a liar, but in recruiting, and that's why a healthcare recruiter is one of the number one jobs for the next 5 years. You're going to need people still. It's not going to go away. You're going to need people. It's just going to have to be a balance, and how you utilize that balance is going to be the key.
Absolutely. So seeing no more questions. As I mentioned when we first got started, this webinar is just the tip of the iceberg in kickstarting the conversations about the role of AI in the future of telehealth and the role of AI in healthcare. And we're going to continue this conversation in greater depth at our upcoming Telehealth Summit. We would love to invite you to join us April 14th through 16th at the Kalahari Resort in the Poconos in Pennsylvania. One of our pre-summit sessions is a 3-hour deep dive exploration of cutting-edge technologies from wearable to AI integration. And so we will get a lot more in depth on this.
I appreciate that you're doing that, because one of the things that we've noticed in telehealth over the last 3 years is, everyone has the conference, people, associations have conferences and things like that. The biggest piece of it is always typically spent, certainly when you look at and I think the ATA is great, don't get me wrong, but a lot of time is spent on technology and compliance. But you think about what's going to be the number one issue in healthcare, telehealth is going to be hiring people. So I really believe that the industry itself needs to spend more time in focusing on hiring practices, on recruiting practices, because it's just going to be imperative that you have everything in place to be successful over the coming years.
Great. Thank you for your comments. And thank you all for joining us. And
Thank you.
Disappointed that we couldn't have both of our speakers and really address some of the clinical care aspects and the provider end of the workforce challenge. But thank you for at least helping us think through some of the uses of AI for addressing the recruitment side of workforce challenges.
Thank you,
So
Kathy, and
my
thanks
contact
everyone.
information. If you have questions about the webinar or questions about what you heard today, we would love to hear from you. And thank you all for joining us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.